There you go. Where are you at, my pal?
I'm actually sitting on my little front porch in my little house in the woods in New York.
Where are you up in like Hudson County or where are you at?
Yeah, Hudson Valley. Yeah,
Hudson Valley? Cool.
in the middle of the woods where nobody can find me.
Well, we found you.
You did, but I let you find me.
What are you playing today? What do you got on your lap?
Oh, this is my little porch guitar. It's one of those little Gretsch things. They're great.
Oh yeah.
Sweet.
It's like $120 little
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
When you want to sound like Lightning Hopkins, that's what you grab.
It's perfect, man, because this is about the quality of the guitars those guys used to use. They got them from Sears, you know?
Yeah. And then they would run out of money and put it in the pawn shop and then go get it back for the gig. Yeah.
Let me open this screen up a bit more. There we go. Cool.
Well, listen, we're in Philly.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. This is now Will's the guitar player. I don't know shit about guitars, but he's gonna ask you some shit about guitars. Like I'm a piano player, so like
my condolences.
But listen, we've been looking forward to having you on the show for a while. There's a lot of Low Cut Connie fans that are also Earl Slick fans. And so when we announced that we're having you on the show this week, people were stoked and they sent us a bunch of questions for you. So this is going to be a lot of fun. So thanks for doing it.
Shoot, baby.
Yeah. So let's start with this record, Fistful of Devils, which is fantastic. And it's kind of like, I feel like it's like a little bit of everything that you do guitar wise in one piece. How did this record come about? I heard you were playing with Buddy Guy and Edgar Winter. What happened there?
You know, this record was done before that.
Okay.
This is really funny. I started writing some stuff, 25 years ago with a buddy of mine. We were trying to get stuff that could be used for like cinematic kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I ended up, we didn't follow through. And he came to me like, I think 2014, he says, you should make a record. And I said, I don't know if I want to do that again. So he talked me into it. I pulled out maybe 3 or 4 bits and pieces that we started years ago.
Yeah.
And I started to finish them and I'm going, you know what? This is falling into place.
Yeah.
And then I've been working with this piano player, Al Mars. He's like Nicky Hopkins back from the grave, man.
Yeah, I was going to say, who the hell's playing piano? Because there's some killer piano shit on this record.
He's a truck driver in Jersey.
All right.
Go figure that one out, right? He even looks like Nicky. If you look at the, do you have a vinyl?
I don't have the vinyl. No, we haven't gotten it yet, but we've been listening to the stream.
Yeah, they'll be on the way, but if you see his photo on the insert, it looks like Nicky. It's uncanny. It's kind of spooky. So we started writing some bits and pieces, and I said, you know what? Maybe we should do this. So I assembled the guys.
Yeah. And
we went in and cut not only those, but there's another dozen tracks with a singer named Michael Houghton.
All right.
He's also in the can, all done at the same time. And I didn't have like a theme in mind. I was just whatever came up that felt good. We wrote it, we finished it, and we recorded all of it. I think the basics were all done in a 2-week period, maybe, if that.
Wow. I mean, like I said, you touch on all these different sounds from your career, but everything, like you always know when it's Earl Slick playing the guitar, I love that Vanishing Point. That's my favorite one.
That keeps coming up. And the little bit in that, the little like chorus bit, that was written 25 years ago. That's all I had. Wow. I just had that little piece. And now the truck driver, I said, Al, take this somewhere else. And he did. And we glued it together and bingo, there it is.
Well, we got to get a truck driver in the band.
You got to find some truck drivers, man.
Holy shit. Maybe there's something I'm missing, but what is JWL? What does that stand for?
It's somebody's initials.
Okay.
John Winston Lennon.
Oh, Jesus. I knew I was gonna. I just knew I was gonna be a schmuck when I asked that question. I knew
Gotcha.
there was something I was missing.
That song, I wrote that with Mark Hudson. And Mark Hudson, if you don't know who he is, he's a record producer, writer. He's written, actually, he wrote "Living on the Edge" for Aerosmith.
Yeah.
And he is the most intensive Beatle-file person that I know.
Sure.
So we wrote that, and it just had that Lennon thing on it.
Yeah.
So that's where the title came from.
Oh, well, speaking of, you obviously a lot of people I mean, we've all heard your playing all through the years. It's so many different eras of music, but your work with John Lennon just continues to resonate. That Double Fantasy record is a stone cold classic, and I love that Milk and Honey record. One thing that people don't talk about enough, since you're talking about JWL, is his guitar playing. I mean, he was a pretty amazing guitar player. Am I right?
That's something that became really evident when we started cutting the tracks. He was a very gritty, for real rock and roll guitar player. He was really good.
Yeah.
I wasn't shocked by it, but I didn't expect that, because if you listen to the Beatles records, they're so polished and you don't get the John Lennon grit playing, but he was great at it.
It feels like to me, look, when I play piano or sing, when Willie plays guitar, like we're feel oriented much more than, technique. I've heard you talk about how you were in the studio doing Double Fantasy and they put a chart in front of you and you were like, what the fuck do I do with this?
I don't know what to do with that.
And was John like that too?
Yeah, yeah, he definitely was. I think that they put the chord chart up as a joke because, after I really couldn't figure out. I was the only guy in there that wasn't one of the top-notch session guys. We had, Tony Levin and Hugh McCracken, God rest his soul, he's been on so many records. He was one of those guys that the public wouldn't know who he was, but they heard him all the time. And so these guys were all chart reading, and I wasn't. And John wanted one guy in there on the guitar end that brought the other, what you're talking about, just the feel and the gritty street thing in there. And that was me.
Yeah. And how did that gig, like I heard you talk about how John thought he had met you before, but you didn't remember it. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. And I think he was right too, because it's funny, back in the day, there's records there's things I just shouldn't remember that I do. And there's things that I should remember that I don't. And, I wasn't per se, I'm an avid Rolling Stones and blues fan. That's really what my deal is. But I always gravitated towards Lennon, even in the context of the Beatles, because the edginess was always there,
Yeah.
So hence he was my, if everybody had a favorite Beatle, that would have been mine. And the fact that I didn't remember it is pretty funny. But we did work on the same record.
It always felt like with John, like in the Beatles, when you stuff like Your Blues and Ballad of John and Yoko, that he was definitely the most blues oriented of the Beatles in terms of like writing. He always seemed to want to do stuff that was more, simple and gut bucket.
Yeah.
Were you listening to blues as a kid, or like what?
At home, my father listened to a lot of big band stuff, as his generation would, and my mother, funny enough, she loved country music. So I heard a lot of country in the house as a kid. Not that I would go and put a record on. I was a little kid, but I think that was embedded in me. And when the British invasion hit, it was the Ed Sullivan Show that got the ball started with the Beatles, and it got our attention. But when I saw the Stones, it was like, okay, that took it from the screaming girls deal
Yeah.
to wait a minute, there's more to this than I like than that.
Yeah.
And so the Stones turned me on to American blues, as did there were a few Yardbirds, you
Yeah.
know, I gravitated towards that, and I don't know why, but I guess I was curious. So I started finding like what is this stuff, you know?
Yeah.
I started buying, you know, Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and some of the old more Delta Robert Johnson stuff because of the Stones. So I was buying those blues records early on, and Chuck Berry too.
Sure. People don't talk about Chuck Berry as a blues guitar player because he is, you know, the real king of rock and roll. But I mean, Chess Records, in the beginning, they weren't even using the word rock and roll, you know. It, what about Bo Diddley? Was he somebody that was?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Because the Stones, I mean, the Buddy Holly stuff was Bo Diddley. If you listen to Not Fade Away, that's Bo Diddley,
Yeah.
and that was on the Stones' first American release. Um, and yeah, Bo Diddley totally loved it, and still do. I mean that whole drum beat thing. And there are some clips of Bo from the '60s on TV that are unbelievable.
Did you ever meet any of these folks? Did you ever meet Bo or Chuck or Muddy or any of these guys?
I have pictures of me sitting on Muddy Waters steps in Chicago. I took about 5 or 6 years ago, because this house is like an historical
Yeah.
thing now. Um, I met Chuck, and actually I sat in with Chuck in 2011. I was doing a New York Dolls tour,
Yeah.
and um, Rob Lohr, his piano player, and me were friends, and we got to St. Louis, and I invited Rob. I said, "You need to come to the Dolls show." He said, "Can I'm doing a thing with Chuck that night." He said, "Let me talk to Chuck. Do you think you can get down to the club after the gig?" I said, "Yeah, we're going on first, so I can get down there." So he talked to Chuck. Chuck invited me down. So I literally, I hired a car. As soon as I got off stage, I just jumped in the car and went down to the
Blueberry
club.
Hill.
Yep. And we did the Duck Room.
Yeah,
And
we played there. We played
yeah,
there.
it was so cool. And then about, oh, I think it was the next year, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame does this Masters thing where they once a year they'll do a tribute to somebody that, you know, one of the Hall of Famers, and you don't have to be dead, which is kind of cool. So they did a Chuck Berry one, and I was invited to sit in. So yes, I did meet Chuck and got to sit in with him. I met Bo Diddley in 1989 or 90 in Los Angeles.
Uh-huh.
I was, this is great. We were doing this video with this band I had around Hollywood Boulevard area.
Yeah.
And we had it was one of those shoots that started at about 2 in the afternoon and it went all night. And I took a break around, I don't know, it was still light out. And I'm walking down Hollywood Boulevard and I see this dude, and he's got, remember those big camcorder things, the original,
Yeah.
and he's walking down the street and he's got this thing pointed at all the girls' skirts. I'm going, who is this motherfucker?
That sounds
And
like Bo Diddley.
as I get closer, I see the hat. I'm going, no. So I went over to him and I introduced myself, and it was him. And I said, "You know what, man? We're doing a video right around the block. You need," and he came back and he's in the video.
Wow.
Isn't that funny?
Bo, man. Oh man. I saw Bo Diddley a couple times, and even at the point when he was 70, I don't know what, and he couldn't stand up playing anymore, he still grabbed a woman from the front row at the end of the show and took her backstage. Like, I was like, God, these guys are just from another era. Like,
It is so cool, man. You know, when I met Buddy, whenever it was 6 years, 7 years ago, uh, You know, Buddy's going to be 85
Yeah.
this summer, and man, he's Buddy Guy. What, you know, it's amazing. You know,
He's still playing guitar like a motherfucker.
hell yeah! I saw that Hendrix show that was going around. He was kind of the headliner of it, but it was like Zakk Wylde and Eric Johnson and all these guys, and these are all really, really good guitar players. And Buddy went on last. As soon as Buddy picked up that guitar and hit the first note, it went through your head like a razor blade, man. It was amazing.
Because he's as I call him, a charismatist.
He's totally that. And there's just this, out of all the blues players that I love, Buddy's got something that's a little bit unique to them. He plays louder than hell.
Yeah.
I mean, he slams it, man. I mean, subtlety is not one of Buddy's strong points, which is why I like him so much. He just rips, man.
Wow. Speaking of 1950s heroes that you got to play with, one of the coolest things that I've watched recently in getting ready for this interview was the Carl Perkins gig that you did. I think it was 1985.
Yeah.
That looked like the most fun thing that's ever happened on the planet. Can you talk about how did that come about?
That was kind of, I was in a band with Slim Jim Phantom and Lee Rocker. For anybody who doesn't know, we're the rhythm section for the Stray Cats.
Phantom, Rocker, and Slick. What a great band. I mean,
we did one good record before we cannibalized ourselves and blew it, but it was a great first record. They were invited to do HBO. Was it HBO? It was one of those early days. Yeah, they were doing this tribute to Carl Perkins thing. So it was in London. And the only reason I was there, because it wasn't a world that I really traveled in at that point, was because those guys had a relationship with Carl. So I didn't even play electric. I was playing acoustic and I didn't care. The fact that I was on stage with these guys, it was a trip because we rehearsed for a few days in some little joint in London. And I remember this distinctly. I think like the second day of rehearsal, I felt like I had an out of body experience because I'm standing there and Ringo's behind me. George Harrison's to the left, Eric Clapton's to the right, Carl's up front. And I'm like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
This is just, this is cooler than it gets.
And in the 70s, all the first wave of stuff that you did with Bowie, had you never interacted or crossed paths with any of those folks then? That was the first time?
Yeah, but I'd seen them live. I'd gone to shows and stuff, but no, I just it's funny, a lot of the public think that every guy in every band knows every other guy in every band. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
It like when I met Buddy, it was a fluke. I was in Chicago to go see the Bowie exhibit that they had going, and I really didn't want to go because I'd already been to the one in London.
Yeah.
And it could be a bit of a hassle when it's open to the public, but a buddy of mine wanted to go. And I was hemming and hawing. So he sent me a plane ticket. So I couldn't say no. So I flew to Chicago. We did that. And we were with Chris Stewart, who's one of the benefactors for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He said, hey, let's go to Buddy Guy's Club. He said, Edgar Winter's playing. I said, cool. Because Edgar played sax on my In Your Face record that I did 150 years ago.
Okay.
So I went and said hi to Edgar, and he invited me up, and we were playing. And so I was looking, I said, is Buddy here? They just, no, he's recording out of town. I went, shit. I'm on stage, and who walks in the front door of the club? Buddy. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And so that's how this stuff happens.
Wow. So all that work that you did with Phantom, Rocker, and Slick, like, were you into rockabilly as a kid, or was that like a thing that you gravitated to later?
I wouldn't say that I was a rockabilly fan per se.
Yeah.
But I really loved, like Brian Setzer really has it down,
Sure.
and I loved that guitar style, but I gravitated way more towards, the Chicago,
Yeah.
the the blues stuff, as well as, some of the Brit blues.
Yeah.
So I liked it and I appreciated it, and obviously I heard a lot of it as a kid, but it wasn't something that it wasn't my first love. And if you listen to that first Phantom Rock and Slick record, it's not really a rockabilly record.
Sure. Sure. It's got, flavors, but
Sure. Yeah.
yeah. But that on the new record, Bad Brew, track one, I wouldn't call it a rockabilly song. It sounds like you. It sounds like Earl Slick, but it's like it has that flavor as well.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that's like a very irreverent rockabilly, like a rockabilly track, because a dyed-in-the-wool rockabilly player would just say that's the wrong guitar sound and blah blah blah, just like we all do to each other all the time. It just, that's when that was written. There was no, like with a lot of the stuff, there was no like, let's write this kind of song.
Yeah.
You sit and a riff comes to you out of thin air, like Radar, and you work with it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things me and Will were talking about before the interview that sort of references. Why don't you ask him about whether he ever lost a gig?
Yeah, Will, you're quiet back there, pal.
I'm soaking it all in, man. Yeah, actually, I guess in your career, you sort of found your voice pretty early on, like that Keith Richards, Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley kind of thing. And you kind of stuck by it, maybe for better or for worse. So I was wondering if that ever kind of cost you a gig or like a session, anything like that.
The way that I've approached my guitar my whole life cost me in the 80s, other than Phantom Rocker and Slick. I couldn't get arrested because that's when the all of the wang bar noodlers were happening.
Yeah.
And I was seriously out of favor in terms of the way I played. I mean, I think if it wasn't for Phantom Rocker and Slick, I would have been out of work for a decade.
Wow. And did you notice that changing a bit, like more in the 90s, like people were getting back to heaviosity and just sort of back to blues a little bit?
Yeah, because as much as you wouldn't think this right off the top of your head, but you get these Seattle bands.
Yeah.
And you listen to, McCready, and you listen to Kurt Cobain even. That's all blues based. I mean, Kurt covered a Lead Belly song.
Yeah. He loved old
Yeah.
blues.
Mm-hmm.
And also that was an era where guitar as an instrument went back to the front,
It did. It's funny that you say that. It went back to the front in one way, and then it went the other direction at the same time, because it went from who could play the most notes and who was the most proficient to feel.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? So if you're talking about, like, I don't really like to compare guitar players, really, because a good guitar player with feel is that's what it is,
Sure.
But it brought back the feel element of it and less of the histrionics, because it became a contest of Floyd Rose and tapping.
Sure.
Which floats my boat. Exactly.
Speaking of, we were talking about John Lennon being such an unheralded guitar player. There's so much that we could talk about through your over 40-year work with David Bowie. But let's first talk about David Bowie as a guitar player. So much great guitar playing that he did, but he didn't seem to really care to be known as a guitar player. Am I right about that?
Truth be told, David was a lousy guitar player.
Okay, let's set the record straight.
Set it straight. But what he could do is he could come up with things that I could never think of, ever. Now, he couldn't play them the way, he couldn't execute it the way he did. So if he did have a guitar idea, he would throw it at me, and then I would, I would do the riff or the bit. He didn't approach guitar like a guitar player, which is why, just like he played a good portion of the guitars on Diamond Dogs.
Right.
I never would have thought of doing any of that kind of stuff as a guitar.
Yeah. We've covered Diamond Dogs, and I play piano, but when Will's trying to learn the guitar part off that, he's like, that shit's weird.
It's totally weird.
Don't make no damn sense.
Mm-hmm.
No.
But that's why it's great. So you stepped into the fold, and I wanted to ask you, because we're sitting here in Philadelphia, and one of the first Bowie things that you did was that David Live record on that tour, which was here in Philly. What do you remember about the shows at the Tower Theater?
They were great shows. I think we did 6 nights, and that record, I think, is a compilation of 2 of the 6 nights. There was a lot of drama attached to that, which is amazing that the show came off as good as it did.
Yeah.
The business people were trying to pull a fast one, and the band literally went on strike.
Ooh.
I mean, before the first night.
Yeah.
And it hit the fan. And then after it hit the fan, we went ahead and did 6 great shows.
There's just like a love affair between David Bowie and Philadelphia. Like I read somewhere that other than New York City, it's the city that DB played the most in the United States. And some of the disc jockeys here in Philly were the first to play Bowie's music in America. What other memories do you have of gigs or sessions here in Philly? Were you here in Philly for the Young American sessions, or were you only in the New York part of that?
No, I was in both. We did, we Sigma Sound.
Yep.
Because David, I've never seen him do it before or after. That the reason that he wanted to use that studio, and the reason he hired people like Luther Vandross and Robin Clark and those folks, was to soak up that atmosphere.
Sure.
And that's why we did the record there. We also I did some overdubs on the Ziggy film.
Right.
Because when they recorded that, they lost some signal on mix and Jeff Beck mics. So I had to sort of fake my way and fill in these gaps. So some of those little guitar bits in there are me uncredited.
And you did that at Sigma?
Yeah.
Wow. It's so amazing. You talk about how the Stones was like a gateway drug for you for American blues. And it's similar with Bowie. People like Bowie and Elton John make us appreciate what we have in Philly more, because in Philly, a lot of people, we don't give a shit about ourselves. Like we don't have a music museum here. There's no Philly soul anything. There's no statue. There's like nothing. But people come from around the world to record here and get a taste of Philadelphia and their music. And then we perk up and we say, oh yeah, we do have something going on here.
You sure do. A lot of those really cool doo-wop vocal bands came out of Philadelphia, man. There's some great stuff coming out of there.
Yeah, even Questlove's father, Lee Andrews, who is from South Philly.
Yeah.
Do you happen to remember the presence of what they came to be called the Young Americans, these kids hanging around the studio?
The Sigma kids.
Yeah. Do you remember that?
Sure do. A matter of fact, every time I'm in Philly doing anything, they'll find me. There's still a few of them running around.
There are.
What's her name? Patty. She's kind of the leader.
Yes.
And she's great. And they're so cool because, they'll show up at the gigs. After the gig, I spend some time and we hang out. And they're not like crazed Lecce fans. They're so cool.
Yeah, and of course the late supermodel Gia Karangi was one of those when she was 13 or 14 years old.
They were kids. They were really young.
It's so amazing to me that an artist of David's stature, because he was superstar at that era, was letting these young kids into the studio. You know,
that was very unlike him, and I think that the reason that happened is that he did develop a love affair with that city.
Yeah.
So I think he just felt. I think he wanted to soak up something from them too.
Yeah, yeah. It's an attitude or something.
Yeah.
David Lynch lived here in his formative years too, and he said Philadelphia is the most wonderful, horrible place I've ever been. If you don't mind, can we talk about Station to Station for a minute? Because it's like one of my favorite of men. It's hard for me to even pick the top 10 of my favorite David Bowie records, but that's got to be in there. It's such an amazing step forward to be coming off of that Young Americans era and then step into Station to Station. Can you talk for a second about Golden Years and how the song came about from what sounds to me like just like a 2-chord little guitar riff?
David had written the song, but what he didn't have was the opening riff. So I came up with that, which is a kind of a combination of a Cream song called Outside Women Blues and a little bit of funky Broadway kind of mishmash together.
Mm.
I don't think I was thinking of that at the time, but that's what lick came out of my hand.
Can you show us on your little Gretsch?
I haven't played that in a while.
When you do it like that, it sounds like Book of White or some shit, you know?
It's totally everything I end up doing, even if it may sound what you might call modern. If you listen, I ripped it off from some old blues guy from 50 years ago or 70 years ago.
Wow. I'm a little confused though why. When I've looked at set lists from the tours from that era, Golden Years didn't get played a lot for being such a big hit. Why do you think that is?
You know, I think, and I don't want this to sound come out wrong.
Sure.
David was a stickler sometimes for certain tunes that if the original guitar player wasn't in the band on that tour,
yeah,
you know, like Stay wasn't in the set list, I think, for a while as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, some of the stuff that Ballou did and some of the other guys and you know, yeah, he you know, so every time I was in the band, that was in the set list.
Because it's your sound. You're saying it's sort of stapled to your sound, and you had such a contribution to it that if you were there, then he would do it, and if not, not as much. Is that
yeah, I think it comes down, especially with my guitar playing, not being very technical. It's the attitude that makes that lick. It's not like the most brilliant lick ever played, you know, but it's the attitude.
I love watching you guys do Stay. I think it's on TV in Germany or something when you did Stay, and David's just standing back watching you play that riff with a smile.
Oh, did he have really long hair?
I've watched a few clips of it, but for David, it's odd to see every time it circles back around to the head where you're playing the main riff, he just stands back and marvels at what you're doing. He just,
you know, it's funny because I think the one you're talking about was done at the BBC Theatre in London.
Okay, I think that is it.
And that would have been when I re-entered the picture in 2000.
Okay.
And when they found me to approach me to you know, to get back in the band, I flew to New York, and the first thing David had the band do was Stay.
Because that was your sort of signature.
Yeah. It served me well.
You guys did a couple records that people don't talk about as much, but I love Heathen and Reality. And then you had this incredible headline performance at Glastonbury, which was then released on a record. Can you tell us about that performance and what you remember about that day?
Well, Glastonbury, we hadn't recorded Heathen yet. If I'm, you know what?
2000 is Glastonbury, so.
Right. No, we hadn't recorded it. You know what? I rarely watch videos of my work.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I just don't do it. But there could have been. I actually have to go look at this because I don't even know what the set list was. But if you heard any of that, it probably was he had probably just written them and we hadn't recorded them.
Yeah.
I just lost my train of thought. It went somewhere.
Yeah, I'm just talking about Glastonbury, which was like one of the last huge hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people gigs that David gave us. And it's preserved in a live record. I'm just wondering if you remember the day, you know.
I do remember the day because a couple of things happened that were kind of interesting. Is right before we went on, David's assistant came to my dressing room and said, "Do you have an extra pair of boots for David?" I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, he got these boots and he doesn't like them." I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Do you have your black Beetle boots with you?" I said, "I'm wearing them." So she leaves and she comes back. She goes, "David really wants to borrow them."
Oh shit.
So
I've done that to him.
Yeah, you've done
I've done that to him many times.
So if I'm sure in the footage, if you see my feet, I'm wearing a pair of low top black Chucks.
Okay.
That's why.
All
And
right.
the other thing is Willie Nelson, you know, Glastonbury, they have a bunch of stages, all the place is huge. And I don't know why Willie Nelson was on the same stage as we were earlier in the day.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen Willie live before. So I climbed up the lighting tower about 30 feet above the stage. So watching it from up there. And all I remember was after I came down from watching the show, I was giddy and hungry. And I'm going, what's going on here?
Contact high.
There was a cloud of weed coming off that stage that you could see from space.
Yeah, man. We played at Willie's Ranch a couple years ago, and it was pungent. It was absolutely pungent. You could smell it from a mile away.
You know, I was never a weed smoker, so I was like, "Whoa, man!" I was looking for cakes and cookies and
shit. Willie's a pretty good guitar player himself, don't you think?
Yeah, I thought his show was great. It was really stripped down. You know, he had his guitar with him, and the drummer had this beat up little kit of drums, but it was cool.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's get back to the new record, Fistful of Devils. Like, what's the plan? Are you gonna do any performances when it's safe to do so? Are you gonna tour with this record? Are you gonna bring the truck driver out on the road? Like, what's gonna happen?
I've already got dates booked starting in November in the UK.
All right.
I'm going to be using the drummer who's on the record, Lee John.
Yeah.
Jesse Smith, a young British singer. He's great. He'll be doing it. And I've got the bass player and the guitar player / keyboard guy from Iggy's band.
Oh, fantastic.
So right now, that's all that's booked so far. Trying to get the truck driver, trying to bring too many guys over there for like, 15 dates, but the work permits and all that.
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass.
It's easier to use the guys there.
Yep.
The drummer is so important because I feed off of that. So and he's the right drummer for the gig. So he'll be the only one, the only American in the band. So
are we going to get a New York and a Philly show, though, at some point, please?
If I can do it, the problem here is I'm just going to be blunt.
Please be blunt.
To somebody like me, it's very difficult to do it here for a number of reasons. One of them is basic, just the size of the place. You know, you can in the UK, you can go from city to city, and you know, you're not having to go 1,000 miles a day or 500 miles between gigs.
It's like the size of Connecticut.
Exactly. You could fit it in New York State with room to spare. And the audience there is a different mentality. They have stuck with me the whole time.
Yeah.
They're still there. Some of that has to do with the size of the place and the fact that I was lucky enough to play with two of their biggest artists.
Sure.
And they pay better.
Sure. Yeah, we know.
It's more dough, man. And I got to pay these guys in the band, and I got, you know, all the expenses, and it just works out better for me across the board.
Well, I get it. Listen, we know the deal, but like, please, like, and let us help you get a gig here in Philly. Like, we'd love to have you here. And, you know, it's just like, this record is like a summation of all the different things you've done in a lot of ways. And I just think it would be really special. And if the truck driver can't make it, although I hope he does, I'll play a little piano for you if you need it.
Well, you come on anyway, even if the truck driver's there. If I were to do any gigs here, he would absolutely be. You know, I mean,
Sure.
Other than Mike Garson and Nicky, especially for an unknown guy that drives a truck, he's one of the best piano players I've ever played with.
Did Nicky do something with Phantom Rocker and Slick at one point?
He did. He played on a few tracks on the record, and he did our first live gig with us, which was in Los Angeles on Halloween. And I had Cassandra Peterson, aka Elvira. She came and she hosted and introduced us. It was a guest, and she was in a whole get up. It was Halloween. It was cool.
Was that like 1985, 84, 85?
86.
That sounds like
85.
That sounds like a great gig.
It was cool. It was a what do you call it? There was a station there. I think it was called KMET that used to do live broadcasts. So it was broadcast.
Before we let you go, Slicky, like, what kind of guitars are you playing lately, other than the Gretsch this little beat up guy?
Yeah.
Well, this is my front porch guitar. I've been using, you know, it's funny. Over the last at least 10 years, I've gone back to the tellies, and I've got a few Nash tellies, which I used extensively on that record.
Got it.
Those I have that, and I got my I mean, there's so many guitars in this house, but I got another Nash. I got three Nashes. One's two tellies and a Strat. And I'm not sure what else I'm going to bring out with me, because I've got a couple of really nice SG Juniors with P90s. I'm pretty much been back to single coil pickups for a long time. And the funny thing is, that's where I started. My original good guitars, the first good guitar I ever bought was a Telecaster. And then the second good one I bought was an SG Junior with a P90 in it. So, you know, that's what I'll be using. And I do have a few famous Earl Slick signature models here that are really good. And I'll probably bring one of those. The problem is I want to bring all the guitars in the house.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Yeah, I love those signature guitars that you have. They're also just like one pickup kind of guitars, and you know, you're not really giving people much of an option. But if you can't get it done with that one pickup and that one volume knob, then you know, might want to go back to your day job or something.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that comes from learning how to play the guitar at a time when the only pedal that existed. And the funny thing is Keith Richards, if you see interviews, they ask him about pedals because he doesn't use them. And only time I really used pedals was with Bowie because you needed to do it. But when I'm doing my stuff, I got like two pedals. You know, I had a not an overdrive, but a fuzz tone and a delay pedal. That's it. And so coming from a period of time where you relied on your guitar, your amp, and your fingers, you learn how to make the guitar do different things without relying on the pedals, you know. A couple of the signature models I have do have two P90s in them, because there's a certain thing I like to do, which are these sort of these Hendrixy kind of rhythm things that needs the neck pickup from the Strat, which my Framus sounds just like that.
You know what the fuck he's talking about?
Yeah, I do,
okay,
man.
all right.
Like that kind of like.
This is going to go over the heads of all of the people watching, going, "What the hell's he talking about?"
Yeah, and it's like that kind of like liquid, kind of like fluid, like rhythm kind of thing.
You know, it's all that. And all that, you know.
Yeah.
Which doesn't sound like that with this guitar, but it's that. You know, those guitars lend itself to some of that, because I did do some of that on the Devil's record.
Right. Listen, Slicky, you've been so generous with your time, but I got one last question before you go. You have, throughout your whole 50-year almost career, floated between being, I guess, what you call a sideman, and being, you know, the artist, you as an artist, you know. A lot of people ask us, because we employ band members and we float through gigs, etc., what the difference between being a sideman and a session player is.
There is a distinct difference, and I credit Steve Cropper and Otis Redding of creating a situation that bridged the gap, because early on, the guys that played on the record didn't play live. It was two different groups of guys. But Otis loved, he loved Steve Cropper. And when Otis was getting ready to go out, you know, he made sure that he got Steve with him. So Steve really became the first guy that played on these hits and also played live.
Yeah.
So it's being a sideman taught me how to be in a band, because as a guitarist right now, I'm a lot more comfortable in the sideman role, because I feel I know how to do it well.
Sure.
As a solo artist, I do try to create a band thing as opposed to me being in front of the stage noodling. That's why I bring a singer with me, so I don't have to do instrumentals all night and put everybody to sleep. And I like to do it like that. But the sideman gig really is, it's not rocket science. You're there to support the lead singer, period. You got to make sure that he looks good. And the only way he's going to look good is if that band knows how to behave itself. Make sure that you're listening and watching everything he does and weaving in and out of the vocals, so that the worst sideman in the world is the guy that's going to be stepping on the vocals. You have to learn how to be the support. And even in the context of my own band, I also use that. So when there's when Jesse Smith is going to be doing vocals, during those songs, I'm there to support him, even though it's my band. The biggest difference, though, between the sideman and the session guy is the session guy specifically plays on the record, and the sideman does the record and is live.
Gotcha.
Like an unofficial band member, basically.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. And as far as rock and roll sidemen go, you're one of the best to ever do it. I want to thank you for dropping by the Tough Cookie Show. All the Low Cut Connie fans are so excited that you're on the show this evening. I'm looking forward to this Fistful of Devils record. I'm looking forward to that UK tour, but I'm really looking forward to whenever that New York and Philly show happens. Let's make it happen. Okay.
If there was more of you, it would already be happening. But you know what? It's not to say that I won't do it.
All right. We're
If
gonna
I can
make that
figure it
shit
out
happen.
next year sometime, I would definitely do it.
All right, let's keep in touch. Let's figure it out. Keep up the great work. Keep playing. And thank you for your great work, Earl Slick. Mwah!
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
See you next year, hopefully.
All right.
Yeah, sounds like a plan.